I would like to welcome today's panelists. First, Professor Bola Akintenewa, Director General, Bolitak Center for International Diplomacy and Strategic Studies. Yemi Ademolekun, Executive Director, Enough is Enough. And joining us on this episode of this program is Kayode Komolafe, popularly known as Keke, Deputy Managing Director of ThisDay newspapers. Keke, good to have you on the program.
I'm pleased to be here.
Yeah, let's start with Kofi Annan, the former Secretary General of the United Nations, who just died. We begin, therefore, in Ghana, where the country is preparing for a week of mourning following the death of Mr. Kofi Annan, the first man from sub-Saharan Africa to become the head of the United Nations. The career diplomat and Nobel Peace Prize winner died after what his foundation, the Kofi Annan Foundation, said was a short illness yesterday. Ghanaians have joined world leaders in paying tribute to Kofi Annan, a man they say was one of the country's iconic personalities.
Kofi Annan is one of the iconic personalities we have here. If we should Ghana boast of him being the first Black Secretary General, in which he was from Ghana, a very, very huge achievement for the country. And it was really sad. We never heard of anything. This morning, I just went to WhatsApp and I saw the news. So I went to the net, and I felt very, 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 very bad. He's someone that I look to, I look up to. I mean, to inspire the youth, to inspire that we from Africa too, we can be there. It's not all about Europe. It's not all about the white doing what is expected of them to do. So I think it's a blow to we Ghanaians, really, really much. It's a blow.
When we heard the news of Kofi Annan, we were very, very sorry, and all our hearts are broken because of how he has lifted Ghana up. And we are very, very sorry. You know, may his soul rest in perfect peace.
I was really, really shocked, and I wish he could live more so he could still continue to impart in the world. And we haven't such great Africans passing on like Mandela and Kofi Annan and even recent former vice president. That is very sad to hear. And I wasn't quite happy. And I thought, in my own perspective, I feel he should have lived a little bit longer, you know, in order to impart more to the world. But death is inevitable, and there is nothing we can do about it. We pray that Ghana will be able to come out with such a great person in future.
Former Secretary General of the UN, Kofi Annan, is missed by all and sundry, including traders, fashion designers, which is something that speaks to the range of his impact, not just at the highest levels internationally, but even also in his own community. And we've even had testimonies in Nigeria about how he was part of the political process in Nigeria at certain times. Prof, at the time that Mr. Kofi Annan was at the United Nations, you were also in the driving seat of the diplomatic process in Nigeria. What is the significance of the man from your own perspective?
In fact, thank you for your question. I would like to quote what he wrote in his foreword to the book I did in honor of Ambassador Oluyemi Adeniji, to let you know his attitudinal disposition to Nigeria, what he wants. If he were to be alive as of today, he should be asking, where is Mr. President in terms of how he expects Nigeria to behave, where we should be. Look at what he said. As this distinguished collection of essays rightly emphasizes, Nigeria must continue its domestic efforts to strengthen good governance, build a robust economy, and resolve internal tensions. If its leadership in foreign policy is to be even stronger in the future, to sustain the leadership, the Nigerian public needs to be educated and informed regarding the country's role in the emerging international order. What does that mean? He's asking us, strengthen the domestic, attitudinal disposition to peacemaking, to industrial development, deal with insecurity. Now, this is how you can know people who really have sympathy, sincere sympathy for you. And if you look at the story about having a permanent seat for Africa, the role he played, if you consider the fact that efforts were made to deny funding of the UN in terms of access dues when he was in place, when you remember the politics behind HIV eradication in Africa, if you also take into consideration the fact that Africa remains on the agenda of UN Security Council many times when he was there, there is no disputing the fact that all that has been said about him in terms of his being non-belligerent, peace-seeking, looking for development of the African people, I think really we have missed as Nigerians a supporter of a united, a viral country, completely free from political chicanery. I think that is what
in fact,
Kofi Annan stands for.
it was very close to the Obasanjo administration. And in 2015, Chief Emeka Anyaoku pointed out that even out of office, he's been very actively engaged across Africa to ensure progress, to ensure stability. And I was part of that, accord signing process before the 2015 elections.
Quite right, yes.
And don't forget also that he's also our in-law.
Yes,
but more importantly, his first wife is a Nigerian, But even more importantly is the role he played on the global stage. His opposition to the invasion of Iraq, his leadership in terms of the Millennium Development Goals. Prof already referred to the Global Fund on HIV/AIDS. Yemi, do you think he was able to function effectively because he was the first staff of the UN, the first insider to get to the very top, and that probably helped him, maybe?
I mean, I'm sure it had something to do with definitely his understanding of the institution and his knowledge of, I guess, what buttons to press. But I think also as a personal disposition, I mean, you can be in an organization, but as a human being, I believe he was also disposed to making, I mean, as a lot of the testimonials have said, making the world a better place. In addition to sort of his role globally, I think for me what I find very interesting about his testimony within the continent is his learnings from his mistake with Rwanda and his very front and center role that he played in Kenya post the 2007 elections. And I think if in the measure of a man is someone who's able not, and he acknowledged the error that they made in Rwanda, and asked, I mean, that there was a failure in that, and in a sense, regrettably so. But then in Kenya, being really determined to ensure and working out a peace treaty for Odinga and Mbaki to work together. So for me, I think that's what I like about his story.
Well, KK, let me come to you. What do you remember about Kofi Annan?
Yeah, his career, is remarkable in many respects. But the one that fascinates me most was his highly principled position during the invasion of Iraq. Despite the huge American pressure, here you are talking of the lone superpower, as it were. He insisted that an invasion must have the authority of the Security Council before it could be legitimate, and that if we didn't have it, it could not be regarded as legitimate. So his principle stands. Even before the invasion, delegitimized the action of America, and he stood up to that. And despite the pressure, despite even blackmailing by America withholding funds, and the rest. And of course, it is an open secret that he couldn't continue, in office because, of the vengeance of America, and that was why he couldn't get the second term, as it were. So that to me, for me, is the high point. Even though the event that involved, he himself acknowledged in his memoir that was the darkest moment. That is the invasion of Iraq. But at the same time, that also was what actually brought out, what I would call the defining character, the defining moment, in his career as a very strong personality, as a highly principled man. Secondly, that despite his, gentle mien, of course, well acknowledged, diplomatic skills, but in pushing across his position was very robust, very unyielding, even though with all, the diplomatic difficulties, and he still maintained his position on a number of issues. And as we have acknowledged, I'm also, as an African, I'm very proud of him that today, if you talk of the Millennium Development Goals, there is no way history will not record that as a concept that the humanity holds a lot to Kofi Annan, and of course, like Yemi pointed out, Africa has been, in terms of the ravaging effect of the HIV scourge, Africa, was particularly a problematic sector, and of course, by leading the campaign and ensuring that a lot of attention and of course funds was that was quite
clearly it was also a very strong moral force internationally and also within the African continent, where it was one of the acknowledged elders within the continent who could sound as voice
Nelson
of reason.
Mandela's group.
A footnote to KK's point and Yemi's is simply the fact that he's more of an international functionary than a diplomatist, because his career, in terms of professional consideration, he worked with the UN. He's not a representative of any country.
But after his retirement, he played an even much bigger role on the African continent as a moral voice, force, and as an icon. That's the point I was trying to make.
To explain why, for instance, his capacity, his capability, all right, is such that internationally he has to be recognized. That look, he got the training from within the system. He now added, his integrity, his personality. In addition, more so, he's internationally respected. If you look at the consideration that 1997, 1999, pre the time he was elected, now he moved the whole world into the new millennium, the new century. And in this case, the challenges were unprecedented. And he sat down. He was cool, calm, and collected in strategizing, bringing his African personality.
Well, good point. And for his efforts, it's good that the memory of him, globally, is a positive one.
Yes.
The United Nations is flying flags at half-mast across all its stations for the next 3 days, and Ghana has declared a week of mourning. And the kind of reaction that we have seen in Nigeria, you will even think that, Mr. Annan was a Nigerian. But more importantly, as part of his legacy, is the fact that he remains a source of inspiration for many young persons across the world that he mentored. He was a very generous spirit and soul who mentored a lot of people, not just with his foundation, but also with the force of his personality.
I think to your point about why Nigeria feels, you would think he was a Nigerian, there's a dearth of leadership on the continent. So when you see one of us who has succeeded and
who embodies
the
what
best, we hope for,
the
then
brightest.
obviously we all associate. And I'm privileged. I got to meet him during Ghana's elections in 2016, and it is indeed an honor to meet someone who just embodies.
Well, I once had the privilege of interviewing him.
Oh, fantastic.
You know, as chairman of the editorial board of The Guardian, along with my colleagues, Mr. Izeze and Debo Additional. It's time now for a break here on This Day Live, the Sunday talk show. When we return, we'll be discussing the decentralization of the Nigeria police force as proposed. Wait.